It's part of our overall mission to expand the deployment of solar in New York City and energy storage as well, in a way that all New Yorkers can take advantage of the energy, environmental, and economic benefits. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with our work, Sustainable CUNY is a strategic program that has two areas of focus: campus and university-based sustainability, and support for New York's distributed generation framework, all under the leadership of Tria Case, CUNY's Executive Director for Sustainability and Energy Conservation. Our partnership since 2006 with the Mayor's Office of Sustainability supports the adoption of clean, renewable energy alternatives, while our ombudsmen are dedicated to providing market support for New York's solar and storage industries, including energy resilience infrastructure, through our Smart DG Hub. Now, with support from the U.S. Department of Energy, New York State, and New York City in particular, our team leads the programs aimed at removing the barriers to the large-scale adoption of solar and, since 2013, battery storage in New York City. A key IT tool CUNY developed to help all New Yorkers is the New York Solar Map and Portal that you can visit at nysolarmap.org. You'll be able to find the solar potential of your home or business with a calculator on our homepage and have access to resources that were collaboratively developed with the Department of Buildings, the Fire Department, and others on permitting, interconnection, zoning, financing, and other topics related to solar and storage. There's a library of reports, guides, and recordings of our past webinars, and we'll post this webinar up there in a few days. Now, here's a quick snapshot of the growth of solar in New York City, accompanied by some of the specific actions the Smart DG Hub and our ombudsman work on every day that triggered this growth. Our team developed a shared solar gateway for those specifically interested in community shared solar. At sharedsolarnyc.org, you'll find an interactive map of community solar installations in New York City. It's our plan to have this site serve as a marketplace for matching community solar developers with building owners who are interested in becoming site hosts, and matching utility customers with community solar projects looking for subscribers. Before we get into the presentations, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping rules. As I said, we had over 250 people sign up for this webinar, so I would respectfully ask everyone to please keep themselves muted throughout the session. We do encourage you to ask questions, though, and you can do that by typing them into the chat box you see on your dashboard. Please direct your questions to questions-sustainablecuny instead of to everyone, which is the default setting in the chat box. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can during the webinar, but if we don't have time for all of them, we'll ask our speakers to respond to the unanswered questions in writing and then post those responses on our NY Solar Map website along with the recording of this webinar. So now I'd like to introduce Chris White to give us an update on NYCHA's solar initiative. Chris?
This is just a little bit of an introduction on who we are. If you don't know who we are the largest public housing authority in New York. Largest public housing authority in North America. We have about 400,000 residents in our operated buildings, and then we also are the Section 8 voucher holder. So we're larger than many major cities. Next slide, please. But we also have a lot of challenges. Most of our buildings were built in the mid-century. We've had major funding shortfalls over the past few decades. So with that in mind, we've had several plans to try and fix our maintenance and financial issues and get us onto solid footing and into the new century. Next slide, please. And part of that is our 25 megawatt solar program. As part of our sustainability agenda in 2016 and the HUD Renew 300 program, we committed to siting 25 megawatts of renewable energy on our property, which was nation leading. Our goals in this program are to generate revenue, use our underutilized spaces, provide job training and green jobs for our residents, to reduce energy costs for our residents, including those who live in NYCHA housing, as well as Section 8 voucher holders and other low and moderate income New Yorkers across the city. One thing that we decided when we were setting up this program a few years ago is that we would do it as community shared solar rather than just purchasing the power ourselves. This is because we're a New York Power Authority customer and we have very low rates, and there are also various regulations, so it doesn't actually make sense for us to purchase the power. It's better for us to use this opportunity to allow New Yorkers who don't own their own roof space to be able to access power and get a discount off their bill. Next slide, please. So we run this in two tracks. There's the commercial solar program, which is focused on our larger roofs and really tries to maximize that lease revenue. And then there is the Access Solar program, Accelerating Community Empowered Shared Solar, which is a very unique program, and this is why we're here today. It's focused more on many of our smaller buildings. We really have a focus on local developers working with community-based organizations and nonprofits. In fact, it's a requirement. And lease payments are not quite as important as really maximizing the benefit to subscribers, maximizing the workforce training, and also to grow the market for community solar and to sort of share what we've learned, because community solar is still a very new concept in the city. It was just legalized a few years ago. There haven't been that many sites yet, but we're really trying to be a market leader because we're such a large landlord. We can use that to really expand community solar. Next slide, please. And just a little more about what we've been doing with Access Solar. We've partnered with Sustainable CUNY. ICF consulting firm has provided us some technical assistance, and this has been grant funded through NYCHA, New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. The teams were required to include local nonprofit or community-based organizations. We helped with Community Shared Solar Gateway, and that has also helped with the matchmaking. And one of the reasons we're here today is, like, as we're trying to learn how to spread these best practices and expand solar in New York for this program and for future rounds, we've discovered that one of the big unanswered questions is how do we reach underserved communities, and especially how do we reach them now in the age of COVID, when in-person outreach is not really possible. So that's a tough nut to crack, but it's really important for these programs where you're really trying to go out and get subscribers and expand the benefits of community solar to everyone. And that's what we're here today to try and discuss and solve. And without further ado, I will then move on to that so we can have our panel discussion and learn about all the great new ideas that we've been trying to figure out. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So today's webinar builds off a workshop we held in Brooklyn last October. At that event, we presented a broad overview of solar in New York, looking at what were then newly enacted local laws that require solar or green roofs on all new construction and major roof renovations, financial incentives for solar under NYCERDA's NY-SUN program, and workforce development programs aimed at providing training for jobs in the solar industry. Our intention now is to focus on other issues that impact the community solar market in New York City. Specifically, as Chris just mentioned, outreach to LMI households with an emphasis on how that's impacted now by the COVID-19 situation. And we're also going to look at the role of community-based organizations in advancing shared solar in underserved communities. We have 4 outstanding experts who will be discussing these topics, and I'd like to introduce them now. Charles Calloway is the Senior Community Organizer and Outreach Coordinator at We Act for Environmental Justice in Harlem. Michael McMiller Jr. is the Student and Youth Organizer for the Partnership of Southern Equity. I should point out that Michael's organization and Sustainable CUNY are both currently working with the National Renewable Energy Laboratories on a Department of Energy funded project to create innovative strategies for the deployment of community-shared solar and energy storage. Juan Parra has been the Community Solar Program Manager for Solar One's Here Comes Solar program since 2017. And finally, we have Daphne Rose Sanchez, who is Executive Director of Kinetic Communities Consulting, a New York certified social enterprise benefit corporation which advocates and implements strategic energy equity market transformations for diverse New York communities. So we're going to start off by asking each of our panelists, and we'll begin with Charles, to respond to our first question, which is to briefly highlight the community shared solar project your organization is involved in that excites you the most, and to please describe the strategies and tactics that you employ in conducting education and outreach to LMI subscribers. Charles?
Yes, and thank you, Ron, for introducing me. Yeah, I don't want to give away all my secrets about the outreach that we're doing, but I'm very excited about the work that we're doing around carbon houses and putting the solar on top of there and reaching out to the community. Even though it's not a part of this question, the biggest concern that we have run across, and it's probably question number 2, but if we weren't in this pandemic of COVID-19, we'll probably be in the buildings. And I know I'm jumping ahead of the game, but I just wanted to say that we're really focusing on how to actually do the outreach that we need to do to low-income communities that are around. We have a couple of buildings that we're focusing on in East Harlem, and getting them the information that they need to sign up for community solar is very important. We've got a couple of strategies around just doing street outreach and maybe doing some tabling. So in essence, we are trying to just get to those buildings in a safer way, and making sure that we are all safe and making sure that people get the information. The last thing I will say is that being a community-based organization, and in the last 4 or 5 years, there have been a lot of people out in the city saying that if they get this, they sign up for this solar company, they will get a discount. And why are we not? And the things that we've been running into is how are we different, right? How are we different than those other companies? So it's letting them know that we are different, that our name's here, we're not leaving, you know who we are. We're about building power in the community. It's about the trust in our name and our brand to make sure that people understand that, you know, we're not trying to scam people, which is taking place for the last 3 or 4 years in the community. So in that, I will close and let someone else talk.
All right, thanks. Let's throw it over to Daphne to tell us about the project that her organization's involved with.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you, Charles, for what you mentioned. So Kinetic Communities Consulting is a minority and women-owned business enterprise. The project that we'd like to highlight is actually our Access Solar project with NYCHA. When we decided to work on this project, we were thinking to be very intentional of providing a way to do community solar locally, exclusively with minority and women-owned enterprises and small businesses. And so we partnered with Euclid Training, which is a women-owned training organization, Renew Energy, which is a minority-owned financial advisor, and we also have Sunlight General, who is our investment partner that is women-owned. And so we really like this project because it is really looking at the existing ecosystem, not trying to create something new, but really supporting local infrastructure, Black, Indigenous, people of color, to enter the solar sector without trying to create something new. And so this project is very near and dear to us because we are really centering community solar within the community, really centering it around organizations, really providing a pathway for NYCHA residents and a pathway for BIPOC individuals to see that solar is industry that they can participate. It's an industry that can really elevate their opportunities for cleaner energy and a healthier living environment. So we are very excited about this project, and we are looking forward to moving it along.
I'd like to now introduce Mike McMiller and have him speak about the project that he's involved with.
Hello. Hey, hello everybody. So we are in the city of Atlanta, in the AUC, the Atlanta University Center, with the three historically black colleges there, working on a solar plus storage project. Get it to be around 2 megawatts, and it's the project is entitled Breaking Barriers, because in the South, people still haven't begun to have that conversation about the benefits of solar and the benefits of battery storage. And so the hope is that we're going to have the community come in and help co-design the project and decide where the solar energy will go based off what we have available, and then ultimately which building will the backup storage be available to, just in case of any emergency. Maybe there's a community center or a library or something in that area where, in case of emergency, no matter who you are, you feel welcome, you feel safe, and you can go there in the midst of a storm or a major power outage. And so, all in all, we've just been very intentional about making sure that the people who don't usually show up to the community meetings, or the people who don't necessarily believe in somebody having their best interest at heart, loving on those people and making sure that they know they have a place to go in a situation of a hard time.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And now we've got Juan Para. So Juan, there are a couple of projects that Solar One is involved in. Is there one you can pick out that you'd really like to focus on?
Yeah, Solar One, for those of you that don't know, is an environmental education organization here, nonprofit here in New York City, and we provide technical assistance to buildings and community groups that want to do their own projects. And so we work with a lot of affordable housing and community-based organizations. In terms of community solar, we have 2 active projects right now that really Sophie's choice to pick a favorite, but they're really similar in a lot of ways. One is a 685 kilowatt community solar project in Sunset Park in partnership with Uprose, Brooklyn's oldest Latino community-based organization, and Co-op Power, which is a cooperatively based community solar developer, or cooperatively owned, I should say. And the other one is this NYCHA Access Solar project, which we're branding Community Power, and that's in partnership with WEAC, so talking to Charles every week on that, Brooklyn Movement Center, and Green City Force on the workforce recruitment side. So there are similarities in both projects. We are implementing workforce development opportunities, so we're not just training folks in solar installation skills, but actually making commitments with the installer to hire them as part of the solar installations for these projects. And we're excited that training is going to start next week. And in both cases, because we're working with Co-op Power, the systems are going to be managed by a cooperative, and the cooperative is made out of the subscribers to the projects. And so there is some indirect ownership of the systems and decision-making around the systems that's happening there too. And the cooperatives can set future energy initiatives. Doesn't have to be related to these projects. They could identify additional energy-related needs in their community in the future and vote on them, which is really exciting. And then in terms of messaging, or in terms of outreach, definitely COVID has put a big twist in our plan, and so we were relying on Brooklyn Movement Center and WEAC to hit the ground running, and now we can't do really any in-person outreach. And so we've shifted a bit, and so we at Brooklyn Movement Center are now leveraging relationships with local affordable housing providers to leverage their relationship with their residents, all of which are low and moderate income, in order to broadcast the details of the project, invite them to our workshops, coordinate flyering and mailers and things of that nature. And then we're also expanding access by providing all our materials and in Spanish and having support in Spanish, because especially working in East Harlem, there's a large Spanish-speaking population there. And then we have a bunch of support along the way. We have more than enough staff that are able to take calls and emails, because we think that at the center of this, education is key. This is a new concept. This is a group that has been, like Charles says, scammed in the past, and so we just want to make sure that we have all the resources available to really take our time when we're communicating this opportunity to households. So I think with all the community benefits in the workforce, the co-op membership, oops, there's a dog, and the way that we're approaching outreach, I think that we are mitigating the impact of COVID of not doing in-person outreach.
Ron, I'm going to jump in here just for a minute here, and thank you, Juan, for giving us the details that you're talking about here about how you're reaching in projects, because I think, you know, the folks on this call, everybody knows the importance of community shared solar and the LMI, and now it's the details that people want to hear, and I think people like you and the others on the panel are going to kind of pave the way and create these case studies that others can follow. And that being said, Daphne, there was a question about your project, the details of your project. Is there anything that you can share with this group?
Sure. So my project is the NYCHA Access Solar Project, where we've partnered with NYCHA looking at development in Harlem, specifically understanding what, you know, can be done to scale community solar with small businesses and local nonprofits. And so we are looking at approximately 700 kilowatts of solar in their buildings, and we're doing a strategy where we're elevating the existing local nonprofits and supporting them with grassroots efforts for LMI customer outreach. One of the things is that community-based organizations have done outreach in the past. It's not new. So when we talk about community solar outreach, the concerns that are around is the concern of, well, how do we ensure that these are truly LMI? How do we capture that information? When in reality, community-based organizations have done this for housing, they've done it for health, they've done it for education. It is not new, and it's something that they've had a really strong relationship with their neighbors and with their constituents to continue doing it. So we're really using a model that is replicable without like external funding, ensuring that there is a baseline, ensuring that there is a framework that can be utilized by NYCHA and other organizations to just pick up and do community solar. And one other point to know is that our project, like for example, the folks that we have on our team are NYCHA residents. Our trainer was a NYCHA alum, so she used to live in NYCHA. And so we wanted to make sure that we're showing NYCHA residents not only, you know, are we engaging the local community-based organizations around you, but we also understand the complexities, and we want to show you a pathway forward that people of color, especially women of color, can get this job done. And these are job opportunities for them as well. Like there is not just like one pathway of education, and there's not only one pathway of opportunity within the sector. And so we want to give that pathway and show that presence to the residents.
Daphne, that was excellent wrap-up of taking a structure that has worked previously and neighbors trusting neighbors. So thank you so much for the details. And I want to remind everybody on the call that our shared solar gateway that we showed you earlier, there's a lot of information on there about the NYCHA Access program, and there'll be more to come on that. Ron, I'm going to toss it back to you for the next question.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to get one more question in on this part of the discussion before we pivot over to talk about community organizations. I want to talk about messaging and what messages resonate with the community and build trust. I just saw that there was a question that came in that mentioned, you know, the third-party electric and gas suppliers that in past years in states that have opened up their utility markets, a lot of people had bad experiences with them. So I'm just curious as to what you think are the resonant messages, and is it purely economic, or are there other factors in play like community redevelopment, environmental protection? Somebody jump in. I'm not gonna try to pin this on anyone. So whoever wants to answer that.
I can get us started. So yeah, I think there's a lot of messaging that resonates with different people. I mean, I think in general, you know, saving money is universally a good thing. And environmental concerns, we've seen that resonate with a lot of customers. And it's also just like the thought of being a part of something new and unique. You know, solar being put on NYCHA housing or being put in any number of low-income neighborhoods here in the city is something that's new and cool, and people just want to be a part of it. And so I think in general, though, it's important just not to put low and moderate income households into a box and think that there's like this one messaging that's going to work for everyone, because these are people and they're all dynamic and they have all types of different interests. And so it's really important not just to think that everyone is attracted to a single message. And that's why, you know, Solar One, we don't know what's the best messaging for East Harlem, but Charles does that over at WEAC. And so that's why we worked with community-based organizations for that kind of like super local context. So it's have those conversations, figure out what those partnerships are, and just talk to people. I'm sure if you talk to a NYCHA resident, they'll tell you why they want to see solar on their roof. And I guess one more thing, it's like it's not always just what the message is, but how the message is delivered. And so I guess this gets into the issue of trust too, because savings are great, but if you overpromise savings, now it becomes a scam in their eyes. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important just to strike that balance between not just what the message is, but how it's coming off and who is delivering the message. All that to say, it's very balanced, it's very nuanced approach, and it takes effort. So anyone that thinks that, you know, you're going to get more LMI subscribers by just promising, you know, this one thing or this other thing, that's not how it's going to work. There's effort that needs to be made in order to figure it out, just like marketing to any other group.
So I'll add on, and the one thing that Juan didn't mention, that we also have that worker training component where we are letting them know that we're employing community members to work on this job site. And, you know, that gives us an open door to have a conversation about why it's important, all the benefits that the community show gives us. And the community also is giving us an opportunity to reduce our carbon emissions and giving people local jobs. So those are two other areas that we can use when we go out into the community to ask them to be a part of the community solar piece.
I was going to say exactly that. I think one of the things that people have this misconception of LMI, which is very extractive, right? Like they just want to come into the community, say, hey, subscribe to this, you know, will you get a discount, and then they disappear. You really need to build a relationship with the community. You really need to understand what the dynamics are. Because, for example, with NYCHA, like NYCHA has suffered decades of disinvestment from the federal government. And so NYCHA residents will see this and say, okay, this is another extractive method of engagement and will create distrust. So you need to understand, you know, what is that dynamics? How do you begin to heal the local the local community and starting to build that relationship, and being transparent about the relationship as well. If you are providing something, providing information on like how that came to be and what's the value to a community that has been historically disenfranchised in the past.
Thank you. So we're going to shift now, and I see that Lori has put the Shared Solar Gateway up on the screen, so you can get a little bit of an idea of some of the resources that are on there, and I can assure you that it's going to get even better as we go on. So I want to shift now to our second topic, which is the role of community-based organizations in advancing solar in their neighborhoods. And my question here is how can solar developers build relationships with these organizations or provide them with the tools that are needed to create partnerships that will lead to the development of more projects in underserved neighborhoods? And I'll ask everyone for an opinion on this. Let's start with Juan.
Sure. Well, I think it's just valuing the expertise that community-based organizations bring. And so they bring a whole host of resources. And so it's in their best interest to make that that connection as well. And so, like I was just saying, like they know the community in and out, so they know the community needs, the community messaging, but they also know like what are the best host sites, like the owners of those host sites. And so there are like really tangible benefits that community-based organizations can bring to the table. And like Daphne was saying, making sure that it's not an extractive process. And so, you know, if you're using the knowledge of community-based organization, you know, pay them and value them accordingly, and not tokenizing their contributions and treat them like contractors, and instead treat them like contractors. So, and I think just look for, you know, connections. Like Solar One is a connector. I sometimes describe it. Our job is like Ocean's 11, and you know, there's like we get the tech person, and we get the car person, and we get the explosives person. So Solar One is kind of like the facilitator, and we find a developer, we find a community-based group, financiers, and we put them together. And so, you know, if you don't have an in with a community-based organization, like just be on the lookout for any types of connectors that can facilitate that relationship building.
So I just want to go back to about 2 or 3 years ago when we actually teamed up with Juan and Solar and CUNY to actually put LMI solar in buildings in Harlem. It was almost a year project. We did all the outreach to all the LMIs. We acted. Solar One came in with the expertise because we were new to the game and understanding how solar works and helped us with the presentation. So we did all the outreach. And then CUNY gave us all the support. So there was a perfect example of how 3 organizations can work well together and come out with a great result when we almost put up, I think, about 400 kilowatts of solar in the last 2.5 years, and there's more to come. So the partnership works. You just got to find understand everyone's role and making sure that everyone completes their role, and making sure that we are working together and do not, like, we're also working with, besides work with Solar One on the community power project, we have some other buildings that are coming online. So it's a growth of a relationship to put solar in Northern Manhattan for We Act.
Yep, I remember that, Charles. That's where we met. Solar Uptown Now, SUN.
That's Solar Uptown Now, that's right. That's right. That was one of the first projects we did in Northern Manhattan, and it was a successful one. And we got jobs out of that, and we got the community involved. We had a RFP project with the community to understand how the whole process. So that was a really good piece that came about out of that project.
Sure. So in addition to ensuring that you're not being extractive to communities, is thinking about our goal, right? So we want and I'll use the context of NYCHA. NYCHA is really interested in installing 25 megawatts of solar. And I think another point that is critical for folks that are doing community solar is really the transparency of the process and the tools to support some community-based organizations to not only do outreach, but to start doing assessments, to start understanding which homes and which buildings can incorporate community solar or can own their solar. Because we need to start moving away from the infrastructure of aiding, and we need to start empowering the communities to do their community solar and own their community solar in the future. And I think it's very critical to have that transparency moving forward, and it's one of the things that we are very happy with our team. And we, in every single project that we do, we're saying, like, we release a process manual so that people know what's going on and so that people can replicate it, because climate change is real and we need to get these solars online. And my organization is one, so we can't do it all. We need other organizations to do it as well.
Yeah, so I think before developers go into a community, they should ask a few different questions. They should ask who benefits, who owns it, and who's missing from the conversation. They should ask, is there a collaborative ownership opportunity? Is there a community benefits model? And then what's the triple bottom line? The people, the planet, and the profit. I think they should look for two types of organizations: policy organizations and programs. The programs organizations are going to address the suffering that already exists, and the policies are going to address the structures that uphold these things. So I think as long as they ask themselves some questions and they go in with a clear heart, then those relationships will be made very apparent, because people stick out who do great work and align themselves with those organizations, and nobody will be left behind in the process.
Great. Thank you for that. All right, we're sticking to our schedule, so it's at this point where we're going to open it up to the questions that have been submitted through the chat box by our audience, and I'm going to turn it over to Lori Riley right now to ask some of those questions. Lori?
Thank you very much, Ron, and thank you to this panel. And it looks like we have a very engaged audience, and they're looking for details. So the first question is, they want to know, what do you offer customers, and what specifically are the different incentives that you access? Share discount on electricity rates or other. They're wanting to know what you're finding that makes it work.
So,
and Juan, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So for us, it's
Thanks,
more
Daphne.
of a, no problem. For us, it's more of a holistic approach. Yes, there's a discount to the customer, but it's also the opportunity for NYCHA residents to see a career pathway. And so we are training staff members. We're also having them do outreach to community-based organizations and creating a level of awareness that sustainability projects isn't something foreign that you hear in the news. Like, solar projects can happen right here within the community, and it can happen with community members. And really providing that kind of educational value, the opportunity for wealth generation development for Black and Brown communities that have been traditionally disinvested in is very impactful to these communities, and it is a critical component of the project design that we incorporate and we implement outside. Is that community awareness is key.
No, thank you very much, Daphne, for that. I have a feeling that this question is related to, economical, incentives, financial incentives, and maybe perhaps, Juan, you have a couple projects under your belt. If you could dive into that detail. We need them all. We need all these kind of incentives. But what's the carrot there that you're dangling financially?
Sure. Okay. And I think it's kind of similar to what Daphne was saying, because there are economic incentives to workforce training, for instance, and then in terms of like the actual product offer, what we're offering is a % discount on solar credits. And so a customer gets a credit on their bill that reflects the amount of energy, the value of the energy that their share of the solar system produced. And they basically get that at a discount. So in New York City, the typical discount is 10%. And so we're aiming to have a higher discount of between 15 to 20% for the low and moderate income projects that we work with. That's made possible by one of those things is favorable lease terms with NYCHA. And so that's something that public entities can do is provide below market lease terms that would increase the customer savings. And then for us, the co-op membership component is also it's not an economic incentive, but I guess outright, but there is, it's a reinvestment into the community that would pay dividends later on by, the community self-selecting what additional energy initiatives that the co-op wants to take on. And so, yeah, I do think that the customer offer is a very direct economic, term, but, I don't want to devalue what Daphne was saying because I think it is.
Oh, absolutely. The workforce development incentive is immeasurable and will be with us for a long time to come. Let's move on to the next question. They want to know who are your primary investors for these projects? And I'll toss that out to anybody that has a specific example.
I don't know if we could say specifically right now, like name names, but I could just say that the projects that we're working on, the financing comes from tax equity, and that's usually like a high net worth individual, and also a bank that provides a long-term loan, and I think that'll be typical for most projects. And maybe I'll just reframe that, and I think what's important for this project in terms of finding financing is that, having partners that are aligned with the goals of the project. And so finding a tax equity investor who, also seeks to maximize community benefit, along with their, they probably have obviously their own incentives for joining the project, but they understand that maybe there needs to be, some concessions if they want to maximize community benefit. And then like the bank that's providing the long-term loan, we're mostly looking at smaller banks that have existing initiatives for community-based projects. And so, I don't want to, specifically, tag someone right now.
No, that was good. That was very diplomatic, Juan. That was great. You were giving us good categories and good clues of what to look for, and it's the same thing that, Daphne had been talking about earlier, is take a structure that's worked. So if you look for a bank that has invested in the community before, that's a good starting point. Anybody else want to jump in before we move on to the next question? Charles or Michael?
No, I'm good.
All right, so, okay. So there's some...
one of the things that's very helpful for us in our project is having a minority-owned partner, Renew Energy, who is an expert in like the financial aspect. So really leaning on to that there are local folks that know the mechanisms of community solar and have that expertise in ensuring that the resources of like which investors are out there and what financial models work for this project can be done locally. Just wanted to add.
Another great suggestion. Great suggestion. The next one is they're looking for opportunities. Is there opportunity for helping with subscriber outreach and management? And then there's a separate question that's direct to NYCHA, to Chris, regarding, can you give the audience ideas for how to engage with Access Solar?
I would say on Access Solar and just our solar program more generally, we had our first round, and we're working with the teams that we selected, which include Solar One and kinetic. I think right now we're trying to work through COVID and really just wrap up the lease agreements and get our first projects constructed. And I think we're hoping that our first solar panels will be in construction in the next couple months. And we're going to be using those lessons learned to build future rounds, which would be an opportunity for anyone on this call. Really, so I think we're hopeful that we're going to have our next round of solar opportunities probably around the end of this year. So I would be on the lookout for that, and I think we're going to continue to try and do outreach and education to really fulfill the Access Solar promise here.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. If we did not get to your question, and don't leave yet, we will take them back to our speakers and we will post them. But in the meantime, we want to give Chris a few minutes to wrap things up. But I'd also like to hear from each of our panelists, Charles, Michael, Juan, and Daphne, a single takeaway that you would like the audience, maybe it's half a sentence, that you want them to remember as they leave today, and maybe they go to 5 more Zoom meetings, but they're going to take away this message you want to give them about community shared solar. And, Charles, let's start with you.
Yes, and thank you very much. So I think the first word is exactly what it says, community shared solar. So it's going to take everybody in that community, the CBOs, the people in the community, to actually get this done. As Mr. White was talking about, this is the first time NYCHA has done this, if I understand correctly. I mean, I know that we are one of the first people in Harlem has done this, but after doing this, we will truly understand the process that it takes to get this done. So once again, the first word, community. CBOs, Solar One, all that good stuff. So thank you.
Thank you, Charles. And take the community. Michael, do you have any words of wisdom for the audience?
Yes, I think we should be focused on community engagement instead of community involvement. So just because you post a flyer doesn't mean that you're actually engaged in the community. Get their input, and always remember the person that's closest to the problem is usually closest to the answer.
Oh, I like that. Terrific. All right, Daphne, words of wisdom from you.
So I would say, Mikey took my spot. I was going to say just, being mindful when you're doing community solar to really get out of your comfort zone, really thinking about what are the organizations and institutions that have been there for decades supporting those communities, and really extending yourself to learn about those ecosystems that have been around since before we were alive, because chances are they are very deeply rooted with those communities. They have been supporting those communities through thick and thin, and they are so passionate about their neighborhoods and the residents around them that your project will happen.
Thank you, Daphne. And Juan, last but not least.
I think those are all good ones. But I would say, this is setting precedent. In terms of the country, community solar is still something that's new and not even allowed in some states. And here in New York City, community solar hasn't really quite taken off as well as in other places, especially in the low and moderate income sector. And so we're definitely building precedent. We are trying creative solutions. So let's not be afraid to try something new. We can only go kind of higher from here. There's a lot of public buildings, a lot of private buildings that could host solar, and there are a lot of people that can use the savings.
Well, thank you very much, Juan. And, he's absolutely right, because we have a lot of partners across the country, and everybody's watching New York City. What NYCHA is doing with the Access program is really breaking new ground. And we know the old saying, we can get it done here. It takes all of us to make the community, and we're really happy to have, we have worked with NYCHA for a long time to get this program built, and I want to give Chris a couple of, just 2 minutes here to wrap things up. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, that was really well said, and thank you, Charles and Michael, and Juan and Daphne, and also thank you to Ron, who I've been working with on this project ever since I started at NYCHA. I think honestly, like what I said just recently about we're really trying to do something that's new and scale it up and expand the world of sort of benefits of solar to people who are just apartment dwellers and just wouldn't be able to access these benefits before would is like it's really, I mean, it's been a long road, but we're gonna have our first systems go online this year, and we're really just gonna scale up, and we're really excited to see what local organizations and community-based organizations can do to really help make sure that we're keeping equity in mind and that we're really expanding the benefits and getting the word out. And just want to thank everyone for your time today and for your great thoughts, and that's really it.
Well, thank you, Chris. We hope that everybody will stay safe. You know, we have no doubt that this will get done, and you'll remember looking back saying, hey, we were there at the beginning of this, and we all worked together on it. We can get it done. Thank you very much, everybody, and especially to Tria Case, our University Director for Sustainability and Energy Conservation, because a lot of this was her brainchild. So we look forward to more collaboration with NYCHA and all of you. Have a safe week.